Thank you. My name is Raghunandan. Uh, I'm an anti-corruption consultant. I was the first program coordinator for iPayAbribe.com and ran it for about 1.5 years or so. I'm also now a member of the political strategy committee for the party named Aam Aadmi Party. So I had a couple of points which I thought were missed out in Mr. Chokar's presentation. We've done a root cause analysis of why political corruption happens. And when you talk to a lot of politicians, you discover that they're also as much victims as perpetrators of corruption and bribery. And the root cause analysis shows that it arises from two things. One is our majoritarianism system. If it's first to cross the post, we don't have a proportional representation system, then it becomes all the more important to get that last one vote that gives you the majority, because it's a winner takes it all kind of a situation. So parties are incentivized to bribe at the margin. They don't bribe their political party workers, but they bribe the undecided voters. That's number one. Another feature, and this is where technology has actually enhanced opportunities for corruption rather than diminished it, is the use of the electronic voting machine. In the earlier days when you voted, ballot papers would be mixed so as to not compromise the secrecy of the ballot before they were counted. But now each machine reveals the voting at that particular booth. And that enables a winning party to take reprisals against groups that were bribed to vote, but data shows that they have not voted for them. So this is actually something that politicians use to harm people who were bribed. Earlier there was a disincentive for bribing because political parties didn't know whether they were sure, they were not sure that they were getting the vote. But now if they know that people have not voted according to, in accordance with the bribes paid at that particular booth, then they can take reprisals. So there were a couple of suggestions, which are very small suggestions. Of course, inner party democracy and all that you have spoken about. There are a couple of points there which I think you missed out. One is the bribing of candidates not to participate in election. So you bribe somebody to withdraw his application so that you can capture his block of votes. There are two suggestions which we would like to have. One is that there must be an electronic totalization mechanism that does not compromise the secrecy of the ballot. And there must be some way of totaling the votes electronically so that the link to the polling booth is lost, number one. And number two, what is your opinion on public funding of elections, government funding of elections? We've done a calculation which shows that if all the MPs and MLAs were denied their dipping in the pork barrel funds, the MP lads and the MLA lads, in 5 years you could have 32,000 crore, which is pretty sufficient for funding parliament and assembly elections. So what are your views on these two measures?
Thank you, Raghu. First of all, I appreciate the root cause analysis. The first past the post system versus the proportional representation system, I personally have no preference, because my belief is, as Justice Santosh Hegde said, that the problem is with implementation of laws. And there's a well-known constitutionalist called Grenville Austin who wrote in his book on the Indian Constitution in the preface that constitutions are inert documents. They perform depending on how they are worked by people. So whether the first past the post system or the proportional representation system, it will depend on how we work them. And my observation as an observer of the political situation in the country, it seems all the smaller parties are in favor of the proportional representation system and all the larger parties are in favor of the first past the post system. But to me, as a person who observes the political functioning, I don't mind whatever system is chosen, but let the political establishment choose that system. I have no say in that. So political parties will decide that and let them get together and decide. But the problem is when it comes to amending the RTI Act to take political parties out of it, there is immediate consensus. And when there is a question of banning criminals from getting elected to the parliament, the consensus does not happen. When the Supreme Court orders, that law is attempted to be changed. So suggestions to change the political system being made to people like us is very frustrating, because the political system does not listen to us. Secondly, bribing the candidates to withdraw in favor of another candidate. Hey, this is amongst the politicians. If they agree on a code of honor, there will be no problem. But when I made that suggestion even to 5 American members of the Congress, they laughed. They said, how can there be a system of honor amongst us? Now, politicians, sorry sir, I'm not singling you out, politicians want everybody else to be honorable, but they don't want to be honorable. Just like the right to information law is applicable to every single public authority in the country determined by the CIC, but political parties' approval needs to be taken before they can be made public authorities. So, the first past the post and the proportional representation and bribing the candidate to withdraw are entirely within the realm of what political parties want to do. And I would be happy if they do anything. But we will then hold them to whatever they do. EVMs and totalizer, my understanding from the Election Commission and news reports is that totalizer system is already in vogue. And your apprehension is right, but I believe based on press reports that the Election Commission has taken cognizance of it. State funding of elections. This is one of those things, you know, if the country knew how much money is required to fund an election, then the country would make arrangements to arrange that money. But the country doesn't know. Political parties don't tell us. I showed you information of 6,753 candidates. 6,719 lied on oath. So, since till we do not know, I mean as a country, that how much money is required for state funding of elections, there cannot be state funding. And this is what Indrajit Gupta committee report said, which has been touted time and again, that state funding of elections, even in kind, will achieve very little, if anything at all, unless other political and electoral reforms are done. This sentence from there, the first paragraph of the concluding chapter, is never cited by any politician. So, transparency has to come first, then state funding will follow. Number one. Number two, denying MP lads and MLA lads, I would be very happy to see the day when that happens. The parliament and state assemblies are not going to allow that. I wish your party gets 2/3 majority in every state assembly and in the parliament, and you can allow that. This is, I agree with you. I think with due deference to the Supreme Court, I think these 2 MP lads and MLA lads are unconstitutional. The Supreme Court judgment, at least I, in my humble personal capacity, don't agree with it. So I think they should go. But the reality is they will not go unless the political system totally changes. And we are trying to change that in whatever ways we can. So that's about.
Hi, let me introduce myself. I'm Sridhar Iyengar. I'm on the governing board of Janagraha. And for a short while, I was also heading an organization in the US, which is called Foundation for Democratic Reforms. And it was in the course of that I actually met with Ramesh, in Berkeley at a conference. My question is, we're talking about money in electoral politics. If I, from a cynical perspective, I'm saying there are a lot of ideas about how to stop it, but nobody has actually come up with a way actually to do it. Is another way, and a counterintuitive thinking, is to say that you fight money with money. And I'm throwing out an idea which I tried last year working with the ex-chairman of the Sierra Club in the US. And being an Indian citizen but an American green card holder, I'm interested in politics in both countries. And the idea was that Citizens United, which is the seminal case in the US, allowed a ton of money to come into US politics, and I think has corrupted it. And there is a case going through the US Supreme Court, Ellen, you may confirm that, where somebody is challenging even the individual limits which each of us are subject to on each phase of an election or for each candidate. And that is going to be heard, and there is a chance that that too might be overturned by the Supreme Court on the basis that it's unconstitutional. My idea is that in countries like India, in countries like the US, money is for a foreseeable future going to have a say in the way in which politics is practiced. Is there a possibility that under the global integrity project that you talked about, then, that people, like-minded people throughout the world, create, I don't know, $1 billion, $2 billion fund, which is used to fight the bad money, in each one of these countries? And I personally think that there are enough people in the world, who would be prepared. At least the US political election, the president of the US and the Congress of the US, in my view, impacts everybody in the world. But we don't have a natural say in how those people get elected. So I'm thinking, just throwing this idea out, has anybody thought about using money to fight money?
The answer to your question is it's been considered many times, and it's been tried many times, and it has never yet worked. There has not been the kind of tremendous groundswell of financial support for that kind of effort to actually have much of an impact in a race. A good case, a recent case in New York State for a state representative. I believe several $1 million was raised to elect one candidate who was ultimately elected. But it took so much money, required so much fundraising, that to even conceive of doing that on a national basis or for a presidential candidate or a senatorial candidate has just been inconceivable. I've seen maybe a dozen or even more examples of groups who are in favor of a more open foreign policy, for example, to back candidates who support that kind of position across the political spectrum, and it has not worked. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm not sure it is possible to fight money with money in the US. Tom, maybe you remember the number. Our last election cost us $6 billion or $8 billion. Someone can translate that to me into lakhs? It's too big. The number is too big to be translated. So the situation in terms of the amount of money we spend combined with the very few people who provide the vast majority of that money has really left US elections in the entire control of the big money interest. And there is no way to fight it, I believe, with other money.
Can I say something? The thought, like fighting money with money is very, very seductive. But I think in practical terms, there is a question of good money versus bad money, if I may say that. And people who have good money don't have too much of it, and they don't want to spare it. Whereas people who have a lot of money, they have some which is bad. I mean, I'm just speculating, just like this is top of my head. They have a lot of money, some of it is bad, and they are willing to use that to protect it. So I don't know, I mean, the practicalities would have to be thought through rather carefully, but I think the idea is pretty sound, but implementing it is going to take a hell of a lot, and starting the implementation will take a lot of money too.
It's a good thing to control the election expenditure. The question is, how do we control this? I would suggest that the Regional Election Commission should fix the total amount that's required for a fair election expenditure. Like the statute now fixes the election expenditure for different MLAs and MPs separately and all. Now, if once the election commission of the region fixes what is the amount required for a particular constituency, then the intending candidate should be called upon to say 10 lakhs is the expenditure, maximum expenditure you can spend. If you want to spend 10 lakhs, you please deposit the 10 lakhs with the election commission. And if some other candidate says, I can't spend 10 lakhs, I can spend only 5 lakhs, then let him deposit 5 lakhs with the election commission. And the election commission should give a securitized chit, which can be negotiable for the purpose of spending it for various election purposes. Why should we make the state spend for the pleasure of these candidates? Let them spend to the maximum extent to be fixed by the election commission, regional election commission itself, knowing the requirement of the topography and the number of people who are the voters there. Then if they want to spend 10 lakhs, okay, 10 lakhs but will be deposited, coupons will be given to their candidates, they can spend it for their payment to their volunteers or for their food, the petrol and vehicle charges. In one way we can keep account of that also. At the same time, since it cannot be transferred to anybody else and nobody else can counterfeit it, it can be detected also. So I feel that the candidate must be made to pay with the election commission controlling the expenditure by keeping the cash with them and giving them coupons in exchange so that they can spend it. And so far as MP LAD fund is concerned, or for that matter, MLA funds are concerned, it's not only unconstitutional, it's it's very dangerous to leave money in the hands of a few people to spend as they like it, without budget. I think that should be scrapped straight away. Thank you.
With regard to state funding of elections, there are pros and cons. Now, there are also various issues which arise, whether the funding should be limited to only recognized political parties, or it should cover all parties or candidates, including independents. The other problem is, even if state funds the elections, still it may not prevent the parties or candidates from spending from other sources. So it may not be really the solution to the problem. The other point is that in regard to Mr. Justice Hegde's suggestion about candidates depositing the amount, that is the amount, up to the limit which is permissible for the constituency, there again the same difficulty will come in, that even if the election commission spends, it will not prevent them from spending something more from their own pocket or from other sources. In Bhutan, there is the state funding of elections, but there I think candidates probably are honest, but parties are honest, and therefore there's no misuse or violation. So it is possible, but there are pros and cons. Now there was another point about MP LAD and MLA's area development funds. Actually what had happened was that I think is common knowledge, that when the 73rd, 74th Amendment to the Constitution was introduced, that is providing for more powers to local bodies, at that time there was a lot of resistance to the amendment, proposed amendment to the Constitution. And therefore, what is said is that it was a good move by the then Prime Minister to sort of influence or pacify the MPs and get over their opposition by providing them funds, that is to the tune of 1 crore per constituency, for ensuring that this had a smooth passage. Then the states also followed suit. They went in for the MLA's fund. So that is the background of this.
My name is Badiul Alam Majumdar. I'm from Bangladesh, and I had basically some comments following ADR's lead and inspired by Professor Chokat and others. We did the similar things in Bangladesh. We were instrumental in requiring disclosures by candidates in running for office. And we found, we recently had an election, and much controversial elections, and we found that those people who are not supposed to hold office of profit, their assets and income went up by several thousand percent, unfortunately. So money is basically leading politics in Bangladesh too. And also another thing that we have been noticing is that those people who used to finance before, the candidates. Now they are becoming candidates themselves. Now about 2/3 of our MPs are business people. And so money is basically ruling. And about the audited statement of the political parties, we can't even get those. Our election commission is denying, and even our information commission is not helping. Now, with regard to financing of elections, in our can election commission, for example, spend some money on, say, posters, the printing posters, and also hold candidate forums instead of candidate holding big rallies and big meetings, and thereby reduce the election expenses. And does anybody have that kind of experience, or does any country do similar things? And what is the result of those kinds of steps by election commission or some other authorities?
Very quickly, I just wanted to ask, one of the foundational aspects that was mentioned by Jagdish Chokar earlier is the issue of black money. And how important is that? If I had to ask you, Ellen, and you, Tom, in your ability to actually, if you can't follow the money trail, either of the politician who's spending the money or the person who is providing this money, because both of them are using black money, and the fungibility of this kind of money to be sitting in different locations all around the globe. How important is this, in your opinion, as something which needs to be addressed? If you had to do the kind of work that you all are doing, would you even be able to do that if you had to address this very foundational aspect that exists in India?
I'd be glad to address the last question. I think most directly applies, to both of us. I quoted, although I did not cite him, former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, who said, "We don't know what we don't know." And I think when it comes to money in politics, the so-called black money, we call it dark money, actually, in the US. The issue is not just that it's not known, it's that it's limitless. And to the degree that one believes that transparency for political financing of candidates or political parties or any aspect of our politics is key, sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. The more secret the money, the darker the money, the more insidious impact it has on elections. And what is most disturbing in the US, and I've worked on this issue of political finance in one fashion or another for many decades now, is that the trend in the US is not towards more disclosure, it is toward less disclosure. There are more loopholes that have been created by recent Supreme Court decisions, and there will be, as to one of the earlier questions, probably even more decisions that will lift aggregate contribution limits. We also feel that delayed disclosure is denied disclosure. This is the 21st century. We expect to get information in real time, whether it's the weather or whether the store we want to shop in is open today, or whether we want to see the political money that our politicians are taking. And in the US, our situation is that we receive the money, the information about the money so late that it is too late to even get the information to the public. And so, again, information delayed is information denied. So we have serious problems in the US. And we know that the kind of disclosure system we have in the US is good compared to most of the rest of the world. So that's why we are focusing on this political finance transparency aspect as the first step to reform.
To carry on from where Ellen left and taking the last question first, Swati's. It's very difficult to completely track it down. Although there is a Supreme Court judgment which says that the onus of explaining that the expenditure has not been done by candidate or his election agent or his or her authorized agent is on the candidate. The Election Commission now maintains what are called shadow expenditure registers. For example, One loophole used to be that somebody would hold a public meeting where 1,000 people would come, they would all be fed, and all this sound system and the shamiana would be put up. And the candidate would say that all this expenditure was, I didn't pay anything because the contractors did that and the food supplier did that and they didn't charge me any money. But now the Election Commission kind of keeps a tab on all this and puts an expense on it. Similarly for paid news, I mean, which is a huge area of confusion. Election Commission has media monitoring committees in every constituency. They scan the newspapers and the televisions, and if they find anything which is seemingly paid for by the candidate, they add that amount to the expenditure declared by the candidate. As a matter of fact, candidates have said this in public fora, that we show less expenditure in our affidavit so that if Election Commission adds anything, it does not exceed the limit. And a case on this paid news affair is in the Supreme Court of Ashok Chavan, the former Chief Minister of Maharashtra, which has taken very interesting turn. The Government of India has said in an affidavit, the Law Ministry, that the Election Commission has a right to accept a statement of expenditure, but has no right to scrutinize it. This is an affidavit given by an official of the Law Ministry in the Supreme Court under Section 10A of the Representation of People Act. So, tracing the entire money trail is very difficult. But the question is the blatancy and arrogance with which the law is flouted. See, I don't believe corruption can be eradicated from any society. It is, I have that much confidence in human ingenuity that we will find ways to be corrupt. But it should not become dysfunctional to the functioning of society. The paid news affair hits at the very root of democracy. The entire election system would be turned into a farce if those things happen. That needs to be prevented. But I think getting a full trail is impossible, but we can get better and better at it with time. Since I am starting from the last question first, Dr. Majumdar, in terms of the Election Commission holding candidate forums, I don't know whether the Election Commission has not done it in India, but there have been instances, particularly in the northeast, where some villages in Manipur particularly have said that no candidate can come here and campaign. We will set up a forum where all candidates will come at an appointed time and they can say their piece and go away. So I really believe that this has to be a citizen initiative. Election Commission, we must, I guess over the years I have become a little sympathetic with the Election Commission, having worked with them. They don't have permanent staff. They depend on the regular government people to do all this work during election time. So for the Election Commission to do everything, I think we will turn them into another Government of India, and we can't even handle one. Having two would be more difficult. So I think citizens ought to do this. Between Mr. Naresh Gupta and Justice Hegde, I think Mr. Naresh Gupta has, based on his absolutely deep and ground experience, has responded to Justice Hegde's comments. But sir, if you think MP and MLA lads are unconstitutional, I would be very grateful for your guidance to question that Supreme Court judgment. I have been feeling very strongly about it, but I have not found anybody to take it forward. And a tongue-in-cheek comment on what Mr. Naresh Gupta said, that the MP MLA lad were introduced so that the constitutional amendment could pass. So this was a very interesting case of bribery being used at perhaps the highest forum of democracy in the country, which is, I really feel terrible about it. But if it is a fact, we have to accept it and work against this kind of thing. Thank you.
I'll just add briefly, we know that we'll never be able to capture all of the information that we might about dark money. I think someone from the audience has already brought up the possibility of situations where a supporter makes a threat to spend on behalf of someone's political opponent. If that threat is accepted and acted upon, there will never be an expenditure, but that's no less real. the concern in the U.S. right now is that we don't know how far the system will evolve. The transition of money into dark forms is still very much a dynamic process that we're only a few cycles into. And at the moment, the body of legal decisions and decisions by our tax services really provide very little reason to operate within established patterns of giving. Those who are major political players, who are members of the 1% that Ellen referred to, are still figuring out that they have these completely anonymous vehicles open to them. And so while at the moment, I think the partial picture that we have does a good job of revealing the relationships that shape our democracy, it's unclear that that will remain the case. The only other thing that I'll add is that you know, a lot of the discussion about expenditure limits, I think it's important to acknowledge that the difficulty we faced in the U.S. is the tension between free speech rights, and speech that's made on behalf of a candidate but not necessarily in coordination with a candidate. The money can flow into outside actors who don't necessarily coordinate with a campaign or party. This was what the root of Citizens United was. It could be very difficult to draw a line. In that particular case, it was a documentary film that was very harsh toward Hillary Clinton and arguably beneficial to her political opponents. But the question of whether or not they're responsible or this was coordinated effort becomes almost impossible to decide. So I want to acknowledge that there are real limits to the viability of putting limitations on the expenditure side within a democracy. I think the most promising approach to this is to make each additional dollar or rupee that's spent on a campaign less effective, so that at some point, you know, the money has a flattened effect, and hopefully everyone has a level playing field on which to compete.